I've killed 17 men in combat. Watched napalm turn jungle into hell. But in 1970, deep in the A Shau Valley, we found something that made the Viet Cong run toward us for protection. They called them Rock Apes. The brass called them misidentified enemy combatants. We called them the reason Firebase Ripcord really fell. My name was Sergeant Mike Torrance, 2nd Battalion, 506th Infantry. If you've heard of the Screaming Eagles, you've heard our motto, Rendezvous with Destiny. In July 1970, that destiny was Firebase Ripcord, a hilltop base so remote, so deep in enemy territory, that resupply choppers only came at dawn. The rest of the time, we lived in a bubble of green hell, surrounded by NVA positions, triple canopy jungle, and the kind of humidity that made your rifle rust while you were holding it. Our squad ran night ambushes. 6 men moving through darkness thick as motor oil, setting up kill zones along trails we knew Charlie used. Rodriguez on point, best nose in the platoon, could smell fish sauce from 50 meters. Thompson with the M60, all Georgia drawl and tobacco spit. Davis, our medic, 19 years old and already looked 40. Kowalski on radio, Polish kid from Chicago who joined up to prove something to a father who'd never care. And Jackson, our squad leader, a second tour lifer who collected ears but read philosophy books. The normal sounds of a Vietnam night were actually comforting after a while. Insects creating this wall of white noise, distant artillery like summer thunder, the occasional crack of a branch that made everyone freeze, fingers on triggers, until Rodriguez gave the all clear. You learned to categorize every sound. Bamboo creaking meant wind. That particular rustle meant snake. The absence of insect noise meant humans moving. After 6 months in country, your ears became your best weapon. But there was this one sound we started hearing in late June. Not often. Maybe once every 3 nights. A hollow knocking, like someone banging rocks together. Command said it was NVA psychological warfare. The Vietnamese had used noisemakers before. Drums, gongs, even recordings of crying babies to mess with our heads. We believed them because what else were we going to believe? You ever notice how the lies we tell ourselves always sound more reasonable than the truth? July 9th, 0300 hours. We're set up on a ridgeline overlooking Trail 547, the main NVA supply route into Ripcord. The rain had just stopped, leaving everything coated in this slick film that made the jungle smell like a compost heap. Rodriguez raises his fist. Full stop. We freeze. M16s swing up. Safeties click off with tiny metallic whispers. But Rodriguez isn't looking at the trail. He's looking up, into the trees. Movement, he whispers. 30 meters, 2 o'clock high. We scan the canopy. Nothing but black leaves against a black sky. Then, the rock sound. But this time it's not distant. It's right above us. Thompson swings the M60 up, and that's when we see them. 3 sets of eyes, reflecting our red lens flashlights like pairs of glowing coals. But the height is wrong. Whatever's up there is big. Too big for the branches it's on, yet they're not even bending. Orangutans? Davis whispers. But there are no orangutans in Vietnam. The eyes blink out, just vanish, like someone flipped a switch. Then the smell hits us, this thick, musky stench like wet dog mixed with rotting meat. Rodriguez starts gagging, louder now, and not from above, from our left, then our right, then behind. They're surrounding us, Jackson hisses. You'd think silence would be a relief after that. You'd be wrong. The sudden absence of sound was like having cotton stuffed in your ears. Even the insects had stopped. "Back to base," Jackson orders. "Now." We move in a tactical column, covering each other's movement. Professional, controlled. Until Kowalski's radio explodes with static and a sound I'll never forget. Breathing. Deep, rhythmic breathing that wasn't coming through the speaker. It was coming from the handset itself, like something was breathing into the circuits. That's when the first rock hit Thompson. Not through. Hit. A rock the size of a baseball, thrown with enough force to knock a 200-pound machine gunner flat on his ass, blood streaming from his forehead. "Contact! Contact!" Jackson screams. But contact with what? We're firing into empty jungle, muzzle flashes strobing the darkness, illuminating nothing but trees and shadows that shouldn't be moving, but are. Another rock catches Davis in the shoulder, spinning him around. Then another hits my rifle, shattering the forward assist with a crack like a bone breaking. We run. Let me be clear about something. We were screaming eagles, airborne infantry. We didn't run from fights, but we ran that night. The next morning, Jackson reports the incident. The lieutenant laughs, actually laughs, suggests we lay off the marijuana the RAMFs were always accusing us of smoking. But then 2nd Platoon comes back from patrol with a similar story. Then 3rd Platoon finds tracks. I need you to understand something about these tracks. They were humanoid, 5 toes, heel strike, clear arch. But they were 16 inches long and pressed 2 inches deep into mud that barely showed our boot prints. Whatever made them weighed at least 400 pounds. The lieutenant stops laughing. July 11th. Jackson volunteers our squad for a reconnaissance mission. Says we're going to find out what's really out there. I think he just wanted to prove we weren't crazy. Or maybe he wanted to prove we were. Either way, we go back out. This time, we follow the tracks. They lead us off the established trails, through wait-a-minute vines thick as ship rope, into a section of jungle so dense our maps just showed it as solid green. The canopy is so thick it's like walking through permanent twilight. And quiet. So quiet our footsteps sound, like thunderclaps. Rodriguez stops us at what looks like a solid wall of vegetation. But when he pushes through, we find ourselves staring at something that shouldn't exist. A temple. Not Viet Cong tunnels. Not a bombed-out French plantation. An actual stone temple. Pre-war, pre-French, pre-anything we understood. Moss-covered blocks the size of cars, fitted together without mortar. Carvings that hurt to look at. Not because they were obscene, but because they were wrong. Geometric patterns that didn't repeat properly. Faces that had too many features or not enough. Montagnard, Davis says, trying to sound scientific. Hill tribe religious site. But the Montagnards we'd worked with had specifically told us to avoid this area. Said it was bat-tinged, unclean. The entrance is a mouth-shaped opening, wider at the bottom than the top. Inside, our flashlights reveal a descending passage. Walls covered in what looks like writing, but might just be scratch marks. The smell from the trees is stronger here, mixed with something else, something chemical, like copper and ammonia. We find the pit 20 meters in. It's perfectly circular, about 10 feet across, edges worn smooth. Our lights don't reach the bottom. Jackson drops a chem light. We count. 5 seconds, 6, 7, 8 before we see the green glow hit bottom. But it's what the chem light illuminates that makes Kowalski drop his radio. Bones. Hundreds of them. Some old enough to be fossilized. Some so fresh there's still meat on them. And they're sorted. Organized. Femurs in one pile. Skulls in another. Rib cages nested inside each other like Russian dolls. Not all the bones are animal. "We need to leave," Rodriguez says. First time I'd ever heard fear in his voice. That's when we hear it. From the pit. That breathing again. But now it's not just one set of lungs. It's dozens. All breathing in unison, creating this bass vibration you feel in your chest cavity. Thompson shines his light straight down, and for 1 second, one perfect, horrible second, we see them. They're climbing the walls, massive shapes, covered in reddish-brown hair, moving up the pit walls like spiders. But their faces are almost human. If humans had jaws that could unhinge, if humans had hands that could grip stone hard enough to leave impressions, if humans had eyes that reflected light in colors that don't exist. The first one is maybe 50 feet down and climbing fast. "Move! Move! Move!" We burst out of the temple running full sprint. Behind us, that breathing becomes something else. A roar that's part animal, part human, part something that predates both. You know what's funny? Not haha funny, but cosmic joke funny? As we're running for our lives, I see an NVA patrol. 5 North Vietnamese regulars, AK-47s at the ready. We lock eyes for maybe 2 seconds. Then they hear what's behind us, and they run too. Same direction as us. Enemies united in fleeing something worse than war. We make it back to Ripcord. The NVA soldiers vanish into the jungle, professional courtesy maybe, or just survival instinct. Jackson immediately reports to the CO, Captain Edwards. Within an hour, there's a full briefing with intelligence officers I'd never seen before. They believe us. That's what scared me most. They already knew. Turns out, there had been reports going back to the French occupation, isolated incidents, patrols vanishing, bodies found arranged in patterns. The French had a name for them, les singes de pierre, the stone apes. But military intelligence had a different theory. Gigantopithecus, this spook lieutenant says, like that explains everything. Prehistoric ape species, thought to be extinct, but in terrain this remote, this unchanged. "You're telling me," Jackson interrupts, "that we're fighting King fucking Cong?" "Not fighting," the lieutenant corrects. "Avoiding?" Standing orders from MACV, no engagement with indigenous primate populations. Indigenous primate populations. Like they were endangered butterflies instead of 400-pound murder machines. But Edwards isn't having it. Firebase Ripcord is his command, and he's not letting some monkeys terrorize his men. He orders a full platoon back to the temple site with enough firepower to, in his words, turn those things into evolutionary history. July 13th, 0600 hours. 40 men move out. 2 M60 teams, a mortar squad, and enough C4 to bring down the temple. I'm with them because I know the way. Also because Edwards made it clear that volunteering was mandatory. The jungle is different in daylight. Less terrifying, but also wrong in new ways. We find marks on trees, claw marks, but in patterns. Deliberate. Some kind of communication maybe, or territory marking. We find scat that's disturbingly human-like, but full of bone fragments and hair. We find Henderson. He'd been missing from 2nd Platoon for 3 days. Listed as MIA, presumed captured. We find him 60 feet up a tree, wedged into a fork in the branches. Still alive, but catatonic. His fingers are worn down to bone from trying to claw his way out. When Doc tries to examine him, Henderson just keeps whispering numbers. 7, 7, 7, 7. We get him down, call for medevac. While we're waiting, He suddenly grabs my arm with those destroyed fingers and says, clear as day, they watch us sleep. Then back to 7, 7, 7. Want to know something that'll keep you up at night? There were 7 of those things in the pit. We reached the temple at noon. In daylight, it's somehow worse. The carvings are clearer. Scenes of tall, hair-covered figures being worshipped by smaller, human-like forms. Or maybe being fed to them. The perspective makes it hard to tell. Edwards orders the demo team to rig the entrance. The plan is simple. Blow the temple, seal whatever's in there, call it a day. The charges are set. We pull back to minimum safe distance. Thompson's got the detonator, his head still bandaged from the rock, but he insisted on coming. Fire in the hole. The explosion is perfect. The entire entrance collapses, thousands of tons of stone sealing the pit forever. For about 10 seconds, we think we've won. Then the ground starts shaking, not like an earthquake, rhythmic, like footsteps. The sealed entrance bulges outward, once, twice. On the third impact, stones the size of refrigerators fly through the air like pebbles. They come out screaming, not roaring, screaming. A sound that's almost human but pitched wrong, like a woman's scream slowed down and played through broken speakers. The first one out is the biggest, 8 feet tall, easy. It moves wrong, knuckle walking like a gorilla 1 second, fully upright the next. Its face is the worst part. Not because it's monstrous, but because it's so close to human, like looking at a reflection in disturbed water. Light 'em up. 40 M16 open fire simultaneously. The M60s join in, sending tracers through the jungle like horizontal rain. The creature staggers, dark blood spraying from multiple hits. But it doesn't go down. It picks up one of the stones from the collapsed entrance, a block that must weigh 500 pounds, and throws it. Martinez, our forward observer, doesn't even have time to scream. The stone hits him center mass, and he just comes apart. More of them emerge from the ruined temple. 4, 5, 6, 7, 7. They spread out, moving through our gunfire like it's annoying rather than lethal. One of them, smaller than the others but faster, gets to our left flank before we can react. It grabs Paulson by the head and I'm not going to describe what it does, but the sound his spine made will never leave me. Fall back. Fall back. But they're smart. They know infantry tactics. As we retreat, they parallel us, using the jungle for cover, throwing those damned rocks with sniper accuracy. We lose 6 men in the first 100 meters. That's when Jackson does something that still doesn't make sense, but saved us all. He stops running, turns around, and starts walking toward them. No weapon. Hands raised. The firing stops. Everyone too shocked to process what's happening. The biggest one, the first one out, meets him halfway. They stand there, maybe 10 feet apart, just looking at each other. Then Jackson reaches into his pocket, slow and careful, and pulls out something I'd seen him carry but never understood. A stone. Smooth, black, about the size of a silver dollar. He'd found it on his first tour, kept it as a good luck charm. He holds it out. The creature looks at the stone, then at Jackson. Then it does something that haunts me more than all the violence. It nods. Jackson sets the stone on the ground, backs away. The creature picks it up, examines it with fingers too human for that inhuman hand. Then it makes a sound. Not a scream, not a roar, but something almost like language. The others stop advancing. They watch as their leader turns the stone over and over. Then, without warning, they just leave, melting back into the jungle like smoke. taking their dead with them. We stand there for maybe 5 minutes, nobody speaking, nobody moving. Finally, Edwards breaks the silence. What the fuck just happened? Jackson turns around, and I've never seen a man look so old. I gave them back something that was theirs. Later, back at Ripcord, I corner Jackson, ask him about the stone. He tells me he found it his first tour in a village the NVA had massacred. Found it in a shrine the locals had built, along with offerings of food and flowers. The villagers weren't worshipping them, he says. They were appeasing them, keeping a bargain. We broke it when we came here, when we bombed their forests and burned their caves. So you gave it back? I gave them an apology. 2 weeks later, Firebase Ripcord is overrun by the NVA. Official records blame inadequate support and enemy numerical superiority. Nobody mentions that our perimeter guards had been reporting rock sounds for 3 nights before the attack. Nobody mentions that when the NVA came, they avoided the entire northern approach, the direction of the temple. Nobody mentions that we found NVA bodies after the battle, arranged in patterns, bones sorted by type. July 23rd, 0200 hours. Ripcord is falling. The NVA has breached the perimeter, and we're fighting position to position. But something else is happening too. In the chaos, in the smoke and screaming, other shapes move through the firebase. They're not attacking us. They're not attacking the NVA either. They're collecting. I see one dragging a body, can't tell if it's American or Vietnamese, toward the jungle. Another is on top of a bunker, just watching. Those impossible eyes reflecting the flames from burning helicopters. Jackson finds me in the command post, grabbing what intel we can before the evacuation. They're here for me, he says. What? The stone. It wasn't enough. They want the one who took it originally. Before I can respond, he's gone, running toward the northern perimeter, toward them. I follow, because what else do you do when your squad leader runs toward death? I find him at the wire, standing in a gap blown by a satchel charge. 3 of them are waiting in the darkness beyond. The big one from the temple is there, still showing wounds from our rifles that should have been fatal. Jackson and the creature look at each other for a long moment. Then Jackson does something I'll never understand. He takes off his dog tags, throws them to me, and walks through the wire. The creatures close around him. Not aggressively, almost gently. Like they're escorting him rather than capturing him. Tell them, Jackson calls back. Tell them we were never here. Tell them the jungle wins. They disappear into the darkness. The rock sounds fade with them. And here's the thing that keeps me up at night. After Jackson left with them, the attacks stopped. Not the NVA attacks. Those continued until we evacuated. But the rocks, the screaming, the sense of being watched by something that remembered when humans were prey. I was on one of the last choppers out of Ripcord. As we lifted off, I saw the firebase burning below us, being reclaimed by the jungle already. And at the tree line, just for a second, I saw them. All 7. Watching us leave. The big one raised something in its hand. Not a rock, not a weapon. Jackson's helmet. I still have Jackson's dog tags. Sometimes, late at night, I hold them up to the light and read his name, his serial number, his blood type. All the information that's supposed to identify a man, but says nothing about who he really was. The VA says my story is PTSD, says trauma makes us create monsters to explain the inexplicable horror of war. Maybe they're right. Maybe the Rock Apes were just some shared delusion, a way for scared kids to make sense of a senseless conflict. But then I remember the NVA soldiers running beside us. I remember Henderson's fingers worn to bone. I remember Jackson walking into the dark. If you're watching this from Vietnam, from Laos, from anywhere near those mountains, and you hear rocks clacking in the night, don't investigate. Some borders aren't meant to be crossed. Some treaties are older than countries. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories they didn't put in the history books. And tell me in the comments. Have you ever encountered something in the wilderness that shouldn't exist? Something that made you understand you weren't the apex predator you thought you were? Because I know I'm not the only one. Jackson wasn't the only one who never really came home. We all left something in that jungle. And sometimes, on quiet nights, I swear I can hear it calling us back. 7 times. Always 7.